Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Carledge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. But we will start today's episode where I'll be talking to one Megan Sanders. Megan has worked in the zoo field for over 23 years, much of it at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado, USA. She began as a keeper in the children's zoo and progressed to caring for carnivores, primates, birds, reptiles, and marsupials. Her experience applying behavior science across species led to her becoming Cheyenne Mountain Zoo's first animal behavior programs manager, overseeing zoo-wide training and enrichment, developing natural behavior, and advancing medical and husbandry training. Megan also spent 17 years teaching in the zookeeping technology degree program at Pikes Peak State College, developing and instructing courses in animal training, animal behavior, and captive animal management. She's also worked as a contract trainer for a service dog organization, consulted long-term with multiple partners, and currently serves as a zoo behavior consultant and course co-instructor for Susan Friedman's Behavior Works LLC. She holds a master's degree in applied behavior science from the University of Kansas, focusing on teaching strategies for animal trainers and transferring skills to real-world settings. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Megan to the Animal Training Academy podcast show today. Megan, thank you so much for taking the time to come and geek out with us on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn about your career, and then in part two of our conversation, geek out a little bit on your thesis that you did for your master's degree. But let's dive into your journey, Megan. Can you take us back? Can you take the listeners back to where you first got started 23 years ago or earlier, learning about animal training, positive reinforcement, and share some stories with us?
Yeah, I mean, we could go way early. Like way early was, we can go way, way early. I literally used to bring squirrels into the dining room of my parents' home. So, that was my very early foray was, bringing the squirrels in with Cheerios. So I guess that was my very first foray into to behavior change was squirrels in the dining room, which then turned into squirrels building nest in my dad's barbecue grill with our jump ropes. So that was fun for everyone in the family. But that was something that did stay with me. I did end up going to college, not right away wanting to do animal work. A little bit I did. My original major was actually in kinesiology. I thought maybe I wanted to go to vet school, but I also played lacrosse. So that was kind of a leg in both ponds, I guess, where maybe physical therapy was something I wanted to do, but it was also going to check off all of my pre-med boxes so I could go to vet school if I wanted to. But then I also had a double major in psychology because I thought behavior was cool. But I didn't really like the clinical side of it. And that was mostly what I was exposed to early in my undergrad experience. And that was cool and interesting, but I just kind of liked the science and it tickled my fancy. So that's where I started. And that was just kind of a side hobby for me until my junior year. I took a psychology of learning course with the dean of the department. And during that course, we had to do a research project. So this was my first big research reviewed or literature review paper. And we had to run rats through a Morris water maze and then report out our results. So this was the first time I got to kind of do an application with live animals. And I loved it. It was like the best thing I'd ever done in college, and loved it so much that he ended up hiring me to work in his rat lab. So I started working in the rat lab at CU. I went to CU Boulder, and ended up pre-training all of his subjects that he was using for a study that he was going to run on learning and how environmental conditions affected learning, and loved that. I was totally hooked on that. And then the semester after I did that, I actually ended up moving to Australia. So I did a study abroad and came down and lived in Australia for what was supposed to be 6 months and then turned into a year. And while I was down there, we traveled a lot whenever we could. And I ended up finding just really small places that I don't even know if they exist anymore, but that were doing a lot of rescue rehab with a lot of hit by car moms that had pouch joeys still. So rehabilitating and then releasing pouch joeys. And it was just really, I think, basic kind of rehab work, releasing these animals, but they were talking and using some of the same language that I had been hearing in the psychology courses that I was hearing. And to me, that connection, all of a sudden I was like, I don't think I want to go to vet school. I don't think I want to continue doing the medical stuff. And I think I really want to do this animal thing. I think this is where I'm actually interested. So I came back to Colorado once my visa ran out, and they kicked me out of Australia. And I dropped all my pre-med stuff with 1 semester left. I probably should have finished. I decided what I wanted to do. And then 3 days after I graduated, I'd applied for a job at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo and started at the zoo. So that's how I got going there. And that's when I started in the children's zoo. So that was my very first position there, was working in the children's zoo. It was domestic animals. So goats and chickens and guinea pigs and rabbits and kids everywhere. And then as a part of that, I also taught preschool. So they had a preschool program that was attached to that job. At the time, it was actually under the education department and not fully under the animal department. So it was another one of those kind of legs in two ponds situation. But kind of found what fit for me. I just felt like a home base. I grew up in Colorado Springs, so that was the zoo that I grew up going to. And it was a cool place to be and start to be able to really develop who I wanted to be as an adult and as a person. And then I started to get to have some experiences that solidified that that's what I wanted to do as a career. So our little children's zoo staff, we had 2 orphan bobcats that came in that we got to help hand rear. We had a porcupine that came under our care. And so what we considered to be quote unquote bigger animals that were, they're no different than any of the other animals we took care of. But that was something that I started feeling like, yeah, this is I think where I'm gonna hang my hat for a while. And kind of fun loop around story. Those 2 bobcat kittens, I consult with the Living Desert in California now, and the very first time I went out there was in 2015, and they had 2 bobcats, and they were the same bobcats that I had hand raised when I was working in the children's zoo. So that was kind of a fun full circle moment. But I worked in the children's zoo for a year, did the preschool thing, and then a position opened up it was called the birdhouse, but it was this area that sort of had a little bit of everything. So it was all those species that you mentioned in my intro. But it was birds, it was reptiles, it was amphibians, it was small mammals. We had large carnivores, the marsupials. So it was not anywhere where you were going to ever focus on a taxa per se, but it was a really cool place for someone who liked behavior and started wanting to cut their teeth on training. And I happened to have coworkers who were of a similar mindset, and we got to be really good at our cleaning routines so that we could have as much time in the afternoon to train as we possibly could. And it was sort of just this perfect storm of people to be together, where we all had common goals in terms of being able to try to learn and get better, and figure out how to train these animals. We spent a lot of time focusing on the small primates. We had callitrichots and lemurs in that area, and then we had mountain lions and snow leopards for the larger carnivores that we were working with at the time. But set some goals that we wanted to do some hand injections. We weren't doing any hand injections at the zoo at that point in time, and got our first hand injections for the zoo in totality on our mountain lions and snow leopards there. And that was kind of the bug. And that was it. That was I was like, this is the thing. This is the contribution that I think I want to make. And this is what I need to start learning more about and getting really good at. And there wasn't stuff like, this podcast when I was learning how to train. So it was really, reading Don't Shoot the Dog. And we had some conferences that were starting to pop up. So at the time they ran a callitrichot workshop. I think it was the very first one we went to just try to learn what we could. We met Ken Ramirez there, and it was like, oh my gosh, the guy that wrote the Orange Book. It was just a matter of reading anything we could get our hands on. And that's where I started to parlay out into other things. So there wasn't a lot that I could get my hands on at the zoo per se. We had just these little pockets of training that were going on. And so I started to look elsewhere to find out as much as I could and broaden my skill set. So I went online and I got a dog trainer certification on an online program. And that's what started the work with the service dog organization. After I'd gone through that and apprenticed with several dog trainers, I, by happenstance, got connected with the local regional director, and they were in need of a trainer to work with their puppy raisers for the Southern Colorado region. And so I got hired for that and did that for many years, where we just did basically puppy classes for all the volunteer puppy raisers. So kind of got to get my hand in the dog training a little bit on that way. And then we were connected with the local college that had their zookeeping degree program that had no behavior classes. And I thought it was a real shame that they were going to send zookeepers out not knowing what training was. And so my coworker at the time, who we're still friends, she works at Zoo Miami now, but we wrote the very first curriculum for a basic training course, which I'm sure if we could find it now, it would be hysterical and and really embarrassing. But even then, we thought it was really important that information went with new people into the field, so that they could know that, it is possible to hand inject. You don't have to dart everything. And so we rolled that out. It was at first an elective. The first several years that we ran the course, we ran it as just a summer offering. And then at this point now, it's required for the degree. It's grown into something much bigger, but that's where that all started too. It was just different ways of being able to try to grow and practice and flex the skill set as much as I could in any different way that I could, until the zoo announced that they were going to hire for this brand new position that they were opening up, which was that animal programs manager or animal behavior programs manager. So I applied for that and did end up getting the job, which was amazing. And as part of that, they brought in NEI, so Steve Martin, to help launch that program and help us give more structure to our training program for the zoo. So like I said, there was training that was happening, but it was just in pockets around the zoo at that point. And this was going to help us really structure it so that everyone was speaking the same language. It was a little more systematic in what we were doing and giving us a foundation to build off of. So Wouter Stillard came out. He actually stayed with us for the first 3 months and worked really closely with him while we started to kind of lay that foundation. Steve was there for a lot of that time as well. So that for me was really a valuable time to dive in head first and start to really digest as much as I could in terms of how do we build a program? How do I coach effectively? How do I start to manage a program and not just be a trainer? So that was a huge growth period for me. That was in 2008. Which is also significant because that was when I first met Susan. So Steve brought Susan in as a consultant for one of the trips that he took out. And that was obviously a really pivotal moment for me. She's still a huge influence in my work today, obviously. But I do remember meeting her and just talking to her and listening to her talk. And there was something about the way that she talked about behavior that was different. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was because it was applied behavior analysis that it just made sense. And the fact that she could explain things in a way that it wasn't like a recipe and it wasn't magic. A lot of times at that time when you would ask people like, hey, can you help me with something? There was a lot of like, magic to it of like, oh yeah, I can train this animal to do it, but like, I can only show you, I can't really tell you how to do it. And with her, she had the why, and she had the why because it's science. And to me, that was a pivotal moment because that gave me direction. And I knew what I needed to study next. It wasn't just, the how. I needed to study the why. And that's how I kind of been pivoted and have been now studying the science behind behavior for the last, since 2008. So that was really a big year for me. But I did that for 5 years. I ran the program for the first 5 years, helped them kind of develop that structure, that foundation. And in 2012, I had my daughter. And so a year later, I decided that I needed to focus on my own primate training. So in 2013, I decided to step away from full-time work at the zoo, and so stepped back from that position and handed it off to Jeremy Dillon, who's still there, who then handed off to Rick Hester, who I know your members know well, who's also still there. So Rick was a keeper when I was the behavior manager. So I've known Rick for many years, but it's kind of cool to have been able to watch that program evolve and continue to grow and become what it is. Do you want me to just keep going?
Yeah, don't stop.
Okay.
3 hours, no.
3 hours. Don't say that.
No, you
it happened.
keep going until you feel like it's natural to stop. And I've made loads of notes. So
okay.
Once we get to that point, then I'm super keen to circle back to a couple of things that stood out to me of interest and pick your brains on them.
Cool. So so kind of stepped back, wanted some extra time to do the mom thing. But I'm not really good at sitting still. So during that time, I continued to teach. So I kept the teaching gig with Pikes Peak State College and kept teaching my training course. And then I pulled more courses in. I added to my teaching load. So that's when I pulled in the animal behavior course to add into that. I started teaching their intro course. And then I added a second training course in. So in addition to the kind of intro to training, I added in, we called it animal training in action, where they trained a rat. So they actually got the hands-on application. It was that kind of nod to the rat lab experience that I got that really was a kind of a corner that turned me to doing what I do now. And then also we had the students partner with the Humane Society here. I wanted them to have sort of that practical experience with the behavior manager at the Humane Society and seeing how that process worked. So they did basically a mini internship as a part of that class, and really enjoyed that. So I kept that going. And then in 2015, so once my daughter got a little bit older and I didn't feel quite so bad leaving, that's when I started consulting. And at first it was just personal relationships that people I had worked with previously that would ask, hey, could you please come in and just help with these couple things? And then that kind of grew into some more consistent travels. They would ask me out multiple times a year. And then that grew into kind of more consistent stuff. So consulting for me started about 10 years ago. And then but it was enough to keep me connected to the work because I really missed it. Leaving the zoo was a hard decision for me. So that was, at least I could stay connected to it. I could continue to learn and not feel like I was falling behind or losing the skills that I had. I could keep current, but still be able to do the momming that I was wanting to do. So it was kind of the happy medium spot for a while. And then I decided I needed to get kind of back into fighting form, I guess, if you want to say. So in 2016, I took LLA as a student and decided I needed to really start getting my chops sharpened again. I needed to, as Susan says, I needed to start playing with better tennis players again, and really start improving. And so I took it as a student. And then from that point forward, I was allowed to sit behind the curtain and kind of watch what was going on behind the scenes, which was a real gift to just even listen to the dialogue between instructors, because there's so many amazing people. As you know, you've had a lot of them on here with you, Kiki, and just so many smart, brilliant people that run in that room. So just even being able to listen to those conversations for me, as I was kind of starting to think about what does life look like as my daughter gets older and I get to step back into more of my professional life, was a real gift for me. And it was actually with some prodding from Rick, who kept saying, well, why don't you just TA? And I was like, I don't know. And I finally got the guts to just say, okay, Susan, like, what would it look like? And she said, I was just waiting for you to ask. So, so I went through my mentorship cycle and then came on as TA in 2019 or 2020. It was in that pre-COVID-y type time where everything kind of bleeds together. But doing that, and it was around that same time, Amy Shills and I had been doing some work together. So we had sort of known each other, but a little bit ships in the night at Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. So we didn't exactly overlap there, but had some like overlap in terms of communication and correspondence. But she'd reached out for some help on things. And then we actually ended up starting to do some work in Belize together. So we originally connected in Central America, even though we live in the same city. But really, really enjoyed working together and wanted to look at expanding consulting together, because we just enjoy kind of bouncing off of each other and kind of the partnership that we had. And so we'd approach Susan just for some advice on what would that look like? You know, can you help us get our arms around what does expanding look like? And how would we do that responsibly and smartly? And it was at that point that she and just invited us in and said, what if we just all did this together? And that's how the consulting team that exists now came together. So, which again, like, you know, how lucky am I, or, you know, very fortunate to get to learn from that group and get to, you know, be able to bounce ideas off of them. And yeah, it's crazy and fun and amazing to get to absorb that information and be able to continue to grow with that group of people. And it's amazing. It's fun. So that all kind of came together around that same time, 2019, 2020. And then, yeah, we've been going since then. I originally applied for the master's program in 2019. I thought I was going to just like do all the things all at once. And COVID hit. And we had, you know, kid at home that suddenly was trying to teach third grade math, which I was apparently really, really bad at, and decided something had to give somewhere. And the master's program is what had to give at that time. Which ended up, I think, being okay, because I don't know that this thesis would have happened had I done it in 2019. I think it would have been something else. And I'm glad that it wasn't something else. I'm really glad that it was this, because this is something that I feel really good about and really strongly about. And I think having those couple extra years of consulting and kind of watching the things, like watching what's needed and what are we missing and what do we need as teachers, what are we lacking as teachers, that was extra information that I think was really valuable for me to have before I went into the program, to get out of it what I wanted to get out of it. So that brought us into master's time. I started in the fall of 2023. Powered through straight on through summer. So it took a full load every semester. Had the brilliant Dr. Christy Alligood as my thesis advisor. So had the great fortune of that as well, which was amazing to have her guidance in terms of research design. She has such an eye for research design and how to put together a study. And then we also had this to start a really small lab. So I feel like I had this, just like wrapped little gift presented to me that was like, here's this really cool thesis advisor who is going to just get what you want to do. And then, by the way, here's this very small lab with a lab partner who also happened to do a behavior skills training thesis. So the two of us, we were constantly bouncing literature back and forth to each other that we thought might be useful to the other one. And it was the perfect storm. Like, I just had the best experience. And it was, it's hard and it's stressful. And there's certainly those moments where you're like, I don't know why I signed up to do this on purpose. But I would do it 1,000 times. It was such a great learning experience and exposure to different applications of ABA. And I was the only animal person in my cohort, so definitely a different viewpoint sometimes on things that we would talk about. But that was one of the things I loved about it was I had a different point of view. I definitely took stuff away from the people I met that work in more of a clinical setting, and hopefully they took stuff away from me that might be a little bit different than what they'd encountered before. But yeah, it was just from start to finish. It was a really great experience. So yeah, and now I get to call myself a behavior analyst, and that is pretty flippin' cool. So
That is pretty flippin' cool. Starting with Morris water mazes and
that's right.
now calling yourself a behavior analyst. And I don't know what a Morris water maze is. Maybe you can enlighten us.
It's basically like a giant kiddie pool that has these submerged platforms, but they're clear, so you can't see them. And then you would set them up and you were seeing if the rats could remember where those submerged platforms were based on like where you dropped them into the pool. Yeah.
Would I be correct in assuming that rats could learn that pretty easily?
Yeah, they did great. I should find that paper. I should read it again and see. I'm sure it would be interesting to read it now with different eyes.
Yeah.
I just thought it was great. I got to go to class and have soggy rats. Like, who gets to go to a college class and like play with soggy rats?
I don't know anyone else. That quickly comes to mind. So
yeah,
no one. Just
no one.
I've done a lot of rehab and releasing baby joeys as well. What a rewarding way to start.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. One of those moments. I have the background on my laptop actually is a picture with me with two wombats in my lap, which is one of my most favorite animals. Still, yeah, like little furry things. Oh, twins.
I love wombats.
Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And it's literally the day that I decided I can't do vet school. Like, I don't know why I'm doing this, and I think I need to quit. And it is literally the picture of the day that I decided to like blow it up and change my life. And the train ride home from that, I remember thinking like, I don't know how I'm going to tell my business, but I think I have to work. I don't know if I knew it was going to be a zoo at that point, but I was like, it's not vet school. Like, that's not going to be it. And it's got to be something like, I'm going to be dirty but I'm going to be so happy. It's going to be so good. But yeah, so thanks, Australia. You did it.
Mhm. You know, coming into today's podcast recording and what I knew about you and your background, I was wrongly thinking that your story would be. I mean, it's remarkably different, but there's so many touch points that are so similar across so many different stories. For example, reading "Don't Shoot the Dog," thinking that you're going to be a vet,
Yeah.
but then pivoting. I mean, these are just such common points across many of our guests here on the show, and also connecting with people like Kiki Yablon. God, she gets mentioned so much on this podcast.
Because she's awesome.
But she's awesome,
Yeah.
100%. We didn't say any more. Like that just sums it up. She is awesome. Susan Friedman. You know what really hit me differently today when you're talking to me is just the legacy of these people, the legacy of Karen Pryor, the legacy of that book. Just one piece of content, the profound impact it's had on you and the other people on this podcast show, but more importantly, at the end of the day, the animals we're working with, and Susan Friedman, for myself, for so many listeners of this show, for so many people around the world. I mean, my wife doesn't really know Susan, but loves Susan. Like she loves her voice. She loves listening to her. She saw someone on the side of the street the other day. She's like, "Look, it's Susan's doppelganger." Like she loves the advice Susan's given us to help us parent.
Yeah.
And one thing that you said there was that Susan said to you, start playing with better tennis players. And I often quote Susan along the same lines. Those lines are, there's always a better tennis player. That's something she said to me a lot, meaning that, she might be, and to say this in a way where we're appreciating the closeness and the relationship between us all. She might see me doing something and put her forehead in her hand and say, "Ryan, why are you doing that?" But she's got Kyle Cheney who's doing that to her. So there's always been a tennis player. But I hadn't heard this idea with that metaphor before, that need to start playing with better tennis players. Can you talk to that? I mean, playing tennis with Susan Friedman, and the likes that you get to do. Like, what does that mean to you? And what can you share with the listeners of the show in terms of the importance of that?
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just means challenge yourself constantly is how I've always interpreted that. I think I had been in a place at that point where, there, I don't want to say that I was the smartest person in the room, because I don't think that's ever the case, but I was in a place academically and maybe professionally where I wasn't being pushed very much. Like all of the growth was coming really from, it was like, I should probably read a book, and I should probably, rewrite this curriculum, or, but there wasn't really anyone that I was chasing at that point. And it was not as fun. And I wasn't growing in a way that I could be. I wasn't being challenged. And so I think she recognized that. And it was a little bit of a challenge to me in terms of are you ever going to really get better if you keep playing down? If you never play against someone who's better than you, how do you improve? And it was a little of a wake up call. The conversation was in terms of, what do you want to be? Like, if you want to continue to play at that level, great, no problem. You're doing well. She always has her very supportive Susan way of approaching things. But in another way, it was saying, you're capable of doing more. And if you don't put yourself in situations where it might be uncomfortable and you might not be the best tennis player on the court sometimes, how do you get better? Like, how do you know that your stroke's not the best unless you put yourself against people who might beat you? And so I had to put myself in rooms where I, probably wasn't the best tennis player in the room, or I felt like I wasn't, if I felt like I'd been out of the game, so to speak, at that point for a couple years. I wasn't in the zoo at that point. Part of it for me, I think, was probably a little bit mental, that I wasn't, actively the behavior manager anymore. And so I needed to push myself to get back in spaces where I didn't feel like I should be, or whatever story I had made up for myself. But yeah, it put me back into eventually a master's program and back into research, which I'd kind of stepped away from, and back into all of these places where now I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I ever didn't feel like I could do these things again. But yeah, I think it is just a matter of, to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. And so sometimes that means being wrong. Sometimes that means not having the right answer. Sometimes that means sitting next to someone who knows more than you. And that isn't a bad thing. It just is an opportunity to grow. So that's what I take away from it. And that's actually, it's a gift. And it was a good reminder for me, one that I needed at that point, and one that I still need. So I hang on to that and remind myself to play with better players. There's always someone better.
Yeah, it is when we can sit here in a reflective, pressureless conversation, recognize it's always an opportunity to grow. It can be really hard, though, for people, including myself, when we're uncomfortable, to navigate that. The challenging thing I've been thinking about recently is, the challenge in navigating that is, you've got so many thoughts swirling in your mind in those moments, that how do you like digest them, order them, anchor yourself with some strong frames? Like, how do you do it?
I don't know if this is a right answer or wrong answer, and maybe there's not a right or wrong answer. I think of my daughter, because she's now 13. And so I have started watching her in this teenage phase of life be so consumed with perception and being wrong. And a lot of this was coming up, she's in middle school. And so I was starting this master program when she was in, 6th and 7th grade. And so I was really aware of what I was modeling for her, so based on some social things that was going on during that time. And so I was like, I think I just have to give myself permission to go into this space, to feel uncomfortable, and to embrace being not knowing what I don't know. And Susan was helpful with that too. I talked to her some before I started the program, and you go into these things because you don't know. Like, if I did know, I wouldn't need to go to a master's program. I could run the master's program or whatever. So the point is not to know. The point is to go and have the luxury, which I now can really lean into. I had the added, I think, mental block of, I was the teacher for so many years, and now I have to go sit in the student seat and not have the answer, where I think I felt like I should have the answer a lot of the time. When I was the teacher, I said, I don't know a lot. Like, if I don't have the answer, I'm not going to make up something for you. So that was a weird place too. But I made it a point to tell her, like, at the end of class sometimes, like, hey, I totally got this wrong tonight, or I didn't have the answer, or because I wanted to, on purpose, model for her that I don't always know either. So I don't know, like, if that's even helpful for anyone else, but that was how I went about approaching it, because it was uncomfortable a little bit to step back into that unknown student space of, I'm going back into the student role with people who are younger than I am. And, you just got to kind of like suck it up. But once you get over that initial hump, or once I got over the initial hump, it was a luxury to just know that my job in that setting was to sit there and just absorb information. Like, it didn't matter if I got something wrong, because my job was all it was to maybe not get it wrong the next time, or get it less wrong. So it was almost freeing to be able to release some of that at some point and just be like, oh my gosh, like I'd love to learn. And at some point I had let that become a burden or a stress that I felt like the pressure of having to be right. And once I got over that first initial, I don't know what it was. I think a lot of us have that in those social settings, but it's like, oh man, like, nope, you actually enjoy this. So why not just enjoy it? And, I realized too that like a lot of those people were like half my age. So like, how about I model for them too what it looks like to just be unabashedly wrong sometimes and not have that ruin my night. Like maybe that could be okay too. Like, whoop, that was wrong. And sometimes it's right. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that even answered your question, but yeah, it's a tough one. And it's hard, I think, where there's so many social reinforcers that come with being right or having the answer. That it's hard to sometimes compete with that. But
I love that. Get it less wrong the next time.
yeah.
I always say, this is a success because we've got more information to make better decisions next time, or get it less wrong the next time. I'm going to add that now. I like that. You also said that in your sharing of your behavior odyssey with us, that your little gift that was presented to you in terms of your lab and the students doing what you're going to talk about in part 2 of our conversation after this one. I bring it up and I ask the questions that I've been asking because I'm just so interested. Hopefully this is interesting for you to listen as well. If you're still listening at this stage, and clearly it is. But I'm so interested in what makes people, the word successful comes to mind, but not even like successful, just because they're on this show because they're doing cool things most of the time. Like, and how did they get there? And I get this, if I may give myself permission to psychoanalyze you in this podcast. I get the sense that you've kind of said, I don't know how I ended up here. Like, I was so lucky to get this, but you kind of said that a couple of times throughout your story, and it made me go, like, is it luck or is it like the way that you operate as a human to put yourself in those positions where Susan Friedman is offering you the opportunity to come work for you, where you get presented with this opportunity to have this lab, where you're working with a humane society, like there's a lot of those random lucky things in your story. And it makes me go, well, there's clearly something else there. Am I wrong?
Yeah. And Susan will call that out probably too when she listens to this. Not luck, Megan. It's not luck. Yeah. So I'll flag that because I'm sure I'll hear that back later. You're right. It's not luck. That would be something we would have to operationalize together. So let's do that right now. No, it is work, and that is something to own too. So it is not an accident that opportunities come my way. So I do seek them out, and I do work really hard. So it's not that I just sit at home and and wait for things to happen to me. I do have a good idea of what I would like to have out of life and the things that really are reinforcing for me. So what makes me, like, what kind of gives me the content that wants to make me talk to you, for 3 solid hours. And then how do I put myself in the way of those types of things? I think part of that is trying to figure out the confidence to do that. And sometimes, you heard me say it in there a few times, like sometimes it takes some prodding, like you got to have some Ricks in your life that are like, hey, you should make a phone call and say these things. But I do always try to be really grateful. Like I am always really grateful for the people that are around me, and I never want to lose track of that. Maybe that's why I say it so often, is that I always am just so like thankful and and grateful that I get to have these people in my life But it's not by happenstance, it is by virtue of working hard and putting myself in the way of things and knowing that I want to have better tennis players in my life, and making sure that I'm, to the best of my ability, nurturing those relationships, um, and doing what I can to keep those relationships strong, and keep those people around. Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point.
You're very reinforced
Yeah.
as a podcast host for my behavior of asking things that make me uncomfortable. That didn't make me uncomfortable, but I'm always like, do I have the right to say that this is how Megan operates? But calling this episode, I think the title will be "To Grow, You Have to Be Uncomfortable." Lately, Megan, I've been realizing that the older I get, the more I'm convinced that Dr. Seuss had it all figured out. There's a book called "Oh, the Places You'll Go." Have you read that one?
Yep.
There's a page in it that says, for people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or a no, or waiting for their hair to grow. That's me. Everyone is just waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wing with curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. And I think there is so much profound wisdom in what you've just shared, because I brought my daughter a Dr. Seuss collection box. And so we've read "Oh, the Places You'll Go" many times. And I've quoted it many times. I've quoted it in our Animal Training Academy community. And then a mentor of mine here in New Zealand, on business side of things, he says that all the time. He's like, people are just waiting. They're waiting for people to come to them. They're waiting for opportunities to come to them. And so what stood out for me in what you've just shared is you've done exactly what I think successful people do, is they don't wait. They go out there and they say, can I have?
Which is also scary. So there's some more discomfort for you,
Yeah, well, I'm glad you shared that. I think it's something, that maybe you don't expect to hear on an animal training podcast. But the reason I think it's so important is because as I reflect on my work as a consultant, and I could just spend 3 hours talking to you about your work as a zoo consultant, but I reflect about what am I being brought into zoos to train, and that is animal training. But I don't think I am. I think we're being brought in to bring in systems that produce long-term, high-quality outcomes that are animal training related. And as I get presented with problems in zoos, Megan, I realized that's all just about systems and processes, and implementing those systems and processes. And that's why I think it's really valuable for the listeners of this show, because it's kind of like, what is this system for getting you to where you want to get to? You've given some really great offerings for the audience of the show today. Surround yourself with better tennis players. How do you do that? Listen to this podcast, listen to other podcasts, get uncomfortable, and stop waiting.
Yeah. Want something bad enough that you're okay being crappy at it for a little bit, and then you get better.
Yeah, because the dog off, I can't remember the cartoon. God, I've never watched a cartoon, but there's a quote, dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something. Someone's going to message me after this, the listener of the show, and tell me what program that's off. I'm curious, what have we got? What's the time? One more question, I think. Here, I got two. What is the biggest challenge for you right now in terms of what you do as a zoo consultant? What do you find the most challenging? Where do you find the area that you have to go to become uncomfortable at the moment?
I think it's always, hard conversations are always hard, but they get easy. I find those are getting easier even. That's a skill set that I think we all develop as well. It's another learn from Susan. I think she has been such an influence in terms of how do you have those hard conversations in a way that are authentic and still kind. Because at the end of the day, that's the information they need, and not having that conversation is actually a disservice to that person. Where do I get uncomfortable? I still get uncomfortable, I think, asking for things still. So that's a funny thing to bring up, because I think that's still a place where it's discomfortable. I don't know if that's necessarily a work thing. It can be a work thing, I guess. It's a good question too.
What do you mean by not having that conversation is a disservice?
If you have information that can help someone be better, but it's going to be a difficult conversation, and so you choose not to have it, you have done a disservice to that person by walking away and not leaving that information behind. So if you're just avoiding a conversation because it's uncomfortable for you, and you're not leaving information on the table that could potentially allow that person to be better or allow an animal to be more successful, because you don't want to have it, that's looking out for yourself, and it's not really looking out for that trainer or that animal. So, it's something to think about in terms of, as a coach or as someone who's going to be working with other people. How can I find a way to build my skill set up so that I am not in a position that it's going to be, I'm not going to be making decisions on and leaving information off the table because I feel uncomfortable doing it. And there's ways to do that where you can do that. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be, all of these things that we build up these hard conversations to be in our head. And I think we sometimes forget that people are behaviors too. It's interesting sometimes to watch people that have all of this sensibility around animal behavior. They can watch every small nuanced move of an ear or a tail or a twitch of a shoulder, and then they'll like spin around and yell at an intern in the kitchen. And it's like, how do you find all of this small nuanced behavior in your non-human learners, and then not apply that same sensibility to your human learners that are around you? So I think kind of like tapping into some of that too, and it's something that I think we all work at. How do we approach this? I think one of the challenges as a consultant, and you might be able to speak to this as well, is that you're there for a really short time. And so you have this compressed window of trying to build relationship to a place where maybe you can give feedback. If it's not something where you're going to be there again or extended, and maybe you have some information that you really want to leave with them, how do you do that in a way that's productive, and that they can hear you and receive the information in a useful way? So that's a skill I think that we're all always working on, is how do we build those relationships fast? How do we deliver that information effectively? Yeah. So that'll be one that I will work on for the rest of my life in all of my relationships, not just consulting and work. It's just a human life skill.
Do you find that fun?
The communication piece?
Challenging yourself, and it's like, this one's going to make me really uncomfortable. There's a massive learning opportunity here for me, like, because I find it fun, and then I'm like, I'm like, that shouldn't be fun, based on like lots of people's perception.
I can say as I've gotten older, yes, I find it more fun. Yeah, well, and I've had actually, I've had one recently where it was one that I was uncomfortable and didn't look forward to. But once I sort of figured out how to enter the conversation, maybe that's the uncomfortable part for me that I've started to figure out how to do better, is how to get in. And then once I'm in, I have the skills that are figured out inside. So maybe it's my entry points that I've been improving on. But yeah, it's just one of those life skills that I'm like, why don't they have a class on this in fourth grade? Like how to talk to your friend when they steal your favorite eraser. That's what we're missing in curriculums, No one wants to know long division. We need to talk about eraser stealing.
And what's your favorite part of what you do now?
Oh man, that's a long list. I enjoy the people. I know a lot of people laugh at that because they're like, oh, we work with animals because we don't like people. I really enjoy meeting people. And for me, training was the very best part of my day. So I hope when I visit somewhere that I get to be part of at least some people's best part of their day, or at least a good part of their day. And just seeing people have success, I think that is one of the coolest feelings, to see someone have a breakthrough or figure out a skill that they've been stuck on, or, just work through a knot that they've had. I don't know. For me, that's the ultimate reinforcer, to get them see or realize how fast it can go when they didn't think it could go that quickly. It's just watching the science work, to me, is the coolest. And especially for someone maybe that hasn't seen it work in that way before. It's like getting to watch it through fresh eyes. So yeah, I don't know. I love it. I just love it all.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I could just keep going and going and going, because I didn't even ask a fraction of the questions that I wrote down based on what you shared. But that wraps it up for this episode. We love hearing about people's behavior odysseys. So thank you very much for sharing loads of pearls of wisdom in there. Just before we officially wrap up part one of our conversation, because we're very lucky to have Megan agree to hang out with me for, as she said, up to 3 hours, recording multiple episodes today. We're gonna dive into her thesis, which I'm really looking forward to. But before we wrap up, can you just tell people where they can go to connect with you online if they're interested in hiring you as a consultant? Where do they go?
If they jump on the Behavior Works website, which is just behaviorworks.org, there's a consultants page which has everyone's bios on there, and you can connect to us on email, send just a hello or a request, and we can get back to you from there.
Amazing. And we will, of course, link to that in the show notes for this episode. This has been so much fun, Megan. So on behalf of myself and everyone listening, we really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartledge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.